Hi, how are you? I hope that you are doing well. I am back from a couple of weeks of leave, which was very much needed. And my boyfriend actually asked me to please not work on YouTube while I was on leave, which was a very good idea. It was very much needed because a lot of love and work goes into making these videos. So I took a break. I started painting again, I went camping and just really filled my cup with lots of good things. Didn't get to read though, which is unfortunate. I'm falling behind on that. But anyways, today I thought that I would talk about 5 of my favorite female artists because last month was Women's Month in South Africa. So I am behind on that, but it doesn't matter because this is what I feel like talking about today. 2 of the artists are historical artists, while 3 of them are more contemporary artists, or at least artists who are still alive. So yes, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea, whatever floats your boat, and get cozy. Let's get into it. So before we get into the list, I thought that I would touch on the subject of female artists in art history. Some of you may know this already, and so you're very welcome to skip ahead to the list. But for those of you who don't know, I recommend that you stick around. So for many years, women have been excluded from the Western art canon, and this has been under revision and a subject of inquiry since the late 1960s and early 1970s, when feminist artists like Judy Chicago, who had a very big influence on me actually during my studies, and art historians have been addressing the role of women, especially in the Western art world, and how art is perceived and valued according to gender. Although women artists have always been involved in the making of art throughout history, their work, when compared to their male counterparts, has often been undervalued and overlooked. Women have always made art at home, but they were largely excluded from art schools and faced limitations like being in separate classes to men and having to focus on decorative arts like ceramics or embroidery, rather than high art or fine art like painting or sculpting. It was only by the late 19th century that women were gradually allowed to study art at art academies, although they still faced restrictions such as not being able to study nudes, which is really silly. Today, although there is still work that needs to be done, there has been a lot of progress in the recognition of female artists, and art historians are still revising art history to rediscover artists that have slipped through the cracks. So first up is Rachel, or Rachel Ruysch. I really hope that I pronounced that correctly. But Rachel was a still life painter during the 17th century in the northern Netherlands. And let me tell you, her works are absolutely gorgeous, especially in the way that she captures the beautiful detail of flowers and plants. And I especially love how she includes little bugs and insects and worms crawling around on the flowers, on the petals, on the leaves, and the plants in her paintings. Her father was a botanist and a physician, so she had plenty of practice using his specimens to practice her drawing. Her paintings were very popular and she enjoyed a lot of fame during her lifetime. Art historians actually consider her to be the most talented still life painter of both male and female artists. I was actually very lucky enough to see her work in the flesh last year when I visited my sister in Scotland. I had actually just discovered her a week or 2 before I went over to visit my sister, and then we went to Calvin Grove Museum in Glasgow, and there I saw 2 of her still lives, and wow, I was so in love. Next up is Camille Camille Claudel. I'm not French, it doesn't come easily to me. Camille Claudel. And she was a French sculptor who made figurative works in bronze and marble. A lot of attention has unfortunately been focused on her relationship with her mentor, teacher, and lover, Auguste Rodin. And he overshadowed her work in the past. But as Rodin's apprentice, she was able to study nudes and the anatomy, which, as we saw earlier, was very unusual during that time. She even assisted him in making his sculptures, so she would model body parts for him, such as the hands and feet in large sculptures like that of the burghers of Calais. Claudel eventually sought to establish her own career and reputation as an artist, and her nuanced portrayals of the human form actually resulted in the state and the press censoring certain works of hers because they were considered inappropriate or too sensual. However, I think that she was actually ahead of her time in the way that she expressed emotion and narrative in her sculptures. So next up is a South African artist, Caryn Scrimgeour. She's based in Cape Town and she's very well known for her tablescapes or still lifes. So how do I describe this? Her paintings are very realistic and they often depict, or usually they depict, a bird's eye view of a table with scattered objects on top of the most beautiful tablecloths you have ever seen. There is so much detail in her work, but not just that, it is so exquisitely painted that you can look at it forever. Her paintings are reminiscent of 17th century Dutch Van Artist paintings, but rather than warning the viewer about the fragility of life or the futility of worldly pleasures that those paintings were known for, her work rather is playful and celebrates the memories that those objects hold. So she delights in those objects. This playfulness in her paintings can look like the aftermath of a dinner party. But her works contain so much emotion and various emotions like longing and nostalgia and sadness and happiness. So viewers resonate with her paintings very much. Now let's talk about Elizabeth Balcomb. Elizabeth is a South African sculptor and she is one of my absolute favorite contemporary sculptors. She is self-taught, which is crazy because the level of detail that is in her work is just amazing. She studied nature conservation and her love and respect for nature is definitely reflective in her work, which is often therianthropic, which means that she often combines human form with animal forms. In many of her works, you will see her figure standing on rods, and if I remember correctly, this is supposed to represent our disconnect with nature as human beings, and how we often see ourselves as above nature. Another sculptor once told me that he thought that these rods were left over from the casting process of the bronze because these sculptures are bronze. So I think that is very cool if that is the case, because then she repurposed these rods, which gave so much meaning to her work. Now we're going to be talking about Beckwith Kraft. Beckwith Kraft is another sculptor and she is based in Zimbabwe. She works primarily with bone, which she ethically sources, so that means that all of the animals that she works with has not been hunted for their bone. Her work focuses on nature and wildlife, creating a conversation around the transience of life and the impermanence of life and honoring nature. Although she is more well known for her carved animal skulls, I personally am absolutely a fan of her carved flower works, such as the one that I own, that is living in my lounge at the moment. I have a statement from the artist here about this particular sculpture, which is entitled Fragile Impermanence. And I think that it is actually a good description or reflection on her work as a whole. Fragile impermanence communicates the fragility of life, both ours and the Earth's. For the artist, working on bone is about being conscious that our life will come to an end, and presenting the final piece in a way that invites conversation about environmental concerns, our purpose here, and living meaningful lives. The giraffe pelvis and roses are evocatively feminine, alluding to the power of women in the cycle of life. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video on my favorite female artists. If you did, please leave a like and comment. Let me know, who are your favorite female artists, if you have any. And if there are any particular artists that you would like me to talk about in future, I think that would be really cool. I hope that you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye!